Just by looking what I cover today, what is only a slight amount of the news that are actually happening, I realized how much shit again has happened. From Sauron suing his own government for $10 billion over the Fed chair nominee from him, Epstein files being released again, and a journalist arrested for journalisting. He was just doing his fucking job. Someone should arrest the guy hiring all those ICE people. Why? Because he's also only doing his job. It is wild, and a normal day feels like a vacation at the moment for so many of us. So let's start, and hopefully the weekend will give us a day off from insane headlines. Welcome to Aardvarh After Dark on this beautiful Friday, the 30th of January 2026. This is the show where we look at today's news and ask the question nobody in power wants to answer. What the hell is going on? I am your host and my name is Aardvarh. Let's find out together. Friday morning, the president announced his pick to replace Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell with Kevin Warsh. Former Fed governor, Wall Street veteran, and someone who thinks you have to lower interest rates. According to the president, his priority number one, it seems. Warsh now faces Senate confirmation. If approved, he will take over position in May, when Powell's term expires. Very smooth transition, very respectful, except for one tiny detail. Most recently, the Justice Department subpoenaed Powell regarding the construction project. In an uncharacteristically blunt response, Powell charged the move was a pretext to push the Fed into following the president's order. A pretext that's diplomat speak for "this is bullshit intimidation." Powell said earlier this month the Fed received subpoenas threatening him with criminal charges over a renovation project at the Fed's DC headquarters. A renovation project. They are threatening criminal charges over cost overruns at a building. Not because Powell did anything wrong, because he won't lower interest rates fast enough. For most of the Fed's existence, it has operated largely free from interference or pressure from the White House. Because when presidents control interest rates, bad things happen. In the 70s, President Nixon pressured Fed Chair Arthur Burns to keep interest rates low in the run-up to the 1972 election. That set the stage for runaway inflation. Consumer prices surged and the inflation rate peaked at around 15% in 1980. 15% inflation because a president wanted cheap money before an election. And now, this decision comes at one of the most precarious moments for the US central bank in decades. With inflation not fully defeated, government borrowing escalating, and the Fed itself facing unusually direct political pressure. So the solution is threaten the Fed chair with criminal prosecution until he does what you want. This isn't economic policy, that is a protection racket. Nice central bank you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it. Maybe some criminal charges, unless you know, lower those rates. A senator has threatened to vote against Warsh's confirmation until the Justice Department resolves its investigation of Powell. At least someone noticed this is insane. But here's the beautiful irony. Warsh has been considered a hawk on monetary policy for most of his career, meaning he favored higher interest rates. Since emerging as a possible successor for Powell, however, Warsh has changed his tune. He spent years arguing for higher rates, then the president dangled the Fed chair job. And suddenly, mysteriously, he thinks rates should be lower. Sometimes it's funny how that works. A senator said, "It is difficult to trust that any chair of the Federal Reserve selected by the president will be able to act with the independence required of the position." Difficult to trust. That's the understatement of the year. The president threatens the Fed chair with criminal prosecution, nominates a replacement who conveniently changed all his economic views, and calls it a regime change. Federal Reserve, independent since 1913. Until now. But wait, there's more. The president sued the IRS and Treasury Department for $10 billion. You heard that right, the president. He sued his own government for $10 billion. The lawsuit alleges they failed to take necessary steps to prevent a former IRS employee from improperly disclosing his tax returns. The lawsuit says he is suing in his personal capacity, not as a president. So he's not suing as the guy who runs the IRS, he's suing as a private citizen who happens to run the IRS that he's suing. The lawsuit claims the tax leak cost him the 2020 election because people found out he paid $750 in federal income tax. Now, about those tax returns. The New York Times reported in 2020 that he did not pay federal income tax for many years and paid just $750 in 2016 and 2017. ProPublica in 2021 published a series about discrepancies in his records. The lawsuit says the reporting falsely claimed the records contained versions of fraud, except that quote actually comes from a finance professor who was one of 12 real estate professionals who saw no clear explanation for multiple inconsistencies. So the reporting wasn't false. Expert did find inconsistencies, but facts don't matter when you're suing for $10 billion. And it's not just this lawsuit. Since he returned to office, he sued the BBC for $10 billion over January 6th edits. He sued the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion over reporting on a drawing he allegedly sent Jeffrey Epstein. The one with the pubic hair, you know. He sued JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon for $5 billion, claiming they closed his accounts for political reasons. The New York Times reported he was seeking $230 million from the Justice Department as compensation for past investigations. So he's suing his own agencies, which he now runs, for billions of dollars, which could be paid by taxpayers because people reported facts he didn't like. That's the perfect scam. Step 1, control the government. Step 2, sue the government. Step 3, taxpayers pay you billions. And step 4, you can only profit from it, so run it again. Welcome to 2026, where the president sues himself, demands taxpayers pay him $10 billion, and calls it justice. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, things are getting very dystopian. Across Minnesota, federal agents are leaning heavily on biometric surveillance and vast interconnected databases, highlighting how a sprawling digital surveillance apparatus has become central to the administration's immigration crackdown. Civil liberties experts warn the expanding use of those systems risks sweeping up citizens and non-citizens alike, often with little transparency or meaningful oversight. There is an app. It's called Mobile Fortify. It allows agents to access CBP and ICE databases from their cell phones in the field. Point your phone at someone's face, instant scan, instant database check. In interactions observed by reporters and videos posted online, federal agents are rarely seen asking for consent before holding their phones to people's faces. And in some clips, they continue scanning even after someone objects. No consent, no warrant. Just scan whoever you want. And who's getting scanned? NPR witnessed immigration agents questioning people in parking lots of big box stores. Are you a green card holder? And all of them were people of color. All of them, every single one. Not suspicious behavior, not criminal activity, just existing while colorful in a Target parking lot. This is what occupation looks like. Federal agents with facial recognition apps stopping people based on how they look, scanning their faces without consent, accessing government databases in real time. And in the ongoing tragedy that's become Minneapolis 2026, the Justice Department announced a federal civil rights investigation into the fatal shooting of Alex Preddy by federal agents. Remember, the ICU nurse, legal gun owner, American citizen, shot by 6 federal agents while holding his phone. Oh, sorry, only 2 were shooting. The Department of Justice is investigating, very serious, very concerned about civil rights. Except, the DOJ didn't open a similar investigation into another deadly federal shooting. Earlier this month, the killing of Renee Good. Good was shot in her car, denied life-saving medical treatment and died. No investigation. The deputy AG insists only some cases warrant civil rights scrutiny. Some cases, not all, just some. And who decides which ones? The same people who did the shooting. Meanwhile, state investigators in Minnesota were initially blocked from the scene, shutting out local scrutiny and fueling lawsuits for evidence preservation. Block local investigators. Investigate yourself, selectively. The same federal government announces it will investigate itself. That's not oversight, that's theater. We investigated ourselves and found that some of us did nothing wrong. The rest will get back to you, maybe. We will investigate when it's politically convenient, when the optics are bad enough, when we can't ignore it anymore. Everyone else is just collateral damage. Also today, the Justice Department released 3 million more pages of Epstein files. Combined with prior releases, that's 3.5 million pages total, 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. So if you had plans this weekend, cancel them, we got some reading to do. 500 attorneys worked around the clock to review and redact this material. The deputy AG had some interesting comments. He said the public should not find the names of any men who abused women in connection with Epstein. Should not will not, should not. That is very reassuring. Blanche said the files include large quantities of commercial pornography and images seized from Epstein's devices, which he did not take. So, commercial pornography on the child's sex trafficker's devices that he didn't take. Totally normal and totally not suspicious. Oh, and the files were due December 19th. They're releasing them 42 days late. Blanche defended missing the deadline, asking that's because we didn't review 6 million plus pages within 30 days. Somehow the Attorney General doesn't care about victims? Yes, that's exactly what missing a legally mandated deadline means. You didn't prioritize it. But here's the interesting part. The files include friendly-sounding emails from December 2013, where Elon Musk writes to Epstein saying he'll be in the Caribbean over the holidays and asks when would be a good time to visit his island, the place where Epstein allegedly trafficked dozens of minors. Just casual holiday planning with a child sex trafficker on his trafficking island, a very normal behavior. Those files contain other big names and they underscore a truth we all suspected. Power and privilege have way more doors than the rest of us. Some people get to visit islands, the rest of us get facial recognition scans at Target. And journalist and former CNN anchor Don Lemon was arrested by federal agents in Los Angeles. And not for tax fraud, not for treason, but for covering a protest inside a Minnesota church service. So here's the setup. On January 18th, protesters marched into City's Church in St. Paul, Minnesota, chanting "Eyes Out" and "Justice for Renee Good," targeting a pastor who also works for ICE. Lemon was there too, with a camera, saying he was acting as a journalist documenting the scene. But federal prosecutors say Lemon and others didn't just film, they interfered with worship, potentially violating civil rights laws and the FACE Act, which can apply to disrupting religious services. He was taken into custody by agents from the FBI and Homeland Security while he was covering the Grammy Awards. Lemon and his attorney argue this is a First Amendment issue. Journalists are supposed to report events, not to be prosecuted for being where the story is. He says he was simply chronicling what was happening. The protest, the chanting, the disruption, and had no role in planning or leading it. In his live-streamed video, he said, "We are not part of the activists, but we're here just reporting on them." But here's the beautiful part. A federal magistrate judge previously declined to approve Lemon's arrest, citing a lack of evidence. And the chief federal appeals court judge in Minnesota rejected a prosecutor's appeal of the decision, writing that there was no evidence of any criminal behavior in Lemon's work. No evidence. Twice. 2 judges say no. So, what did the Justice Department do? On Friday morning, officials celebrated the arrest of Lemon in California after failing twice to secure arrest warrants for him in Minnesota. They couldn't get a warrant in Minnesota, so they arrested him in California. Attorney General Pam Bondi took personal credit, posting that the arrests occurred at her direction in connection with the coordinated attack on City's church. Coordinated attack, that's what they're calling journalism now. And the official White House account posted an image Friday morning touting Lemon's arrest with the caption, "When life gives you lemons," and an emoji of chains. Chains. The White House posted chains. About arresting a black journalist. Read the room, guys. Lemon's attorney, Abe Lowell, said, instead of investigating the federal agents who killed 2 peaceful Minnesota protesters, the Sauron Justice Department is devoting its time, attention, and resources to this arrest, and that is the real indictment of wrongdoing in this case. The Justice Department says it's protecting religious freedom and the right to worship without disruption. Critics say it's focusing on arresting media instead of investigating agents who killed protesters. And they're both right, because one is the stated goal, the other is the actual goal. So, there we are, just another day in America. And here is what we are all sharing. Federal agents killing citizens, the Fed being threatened into submission, journalists arrested for journalism, surveillance states in parking lots, 330 million one nightmare. This is Aardvarh After Dark. See you on Monday if we make it that long. Thank you for listening and take care.